Hello and welcome to 10 Things You Can Try for De-Escalation. I am so happy you're joining me for this today, and I hope that you will find it valuable. I'm going to go ahead and just take a few seconds to share my screen so that you can see the presentation. So here we are, an overview of de-escalation strategies, 10 things to try. The goals for today are to gain a basic understanding of the crisis cycle, identify some of the behaviors that may be present prior to crisis behaviors, and we're going to identify 10 de-escalation strategies that may be helpful with some explanations and some ideas for each. So the first thing we need to really think about is why understanding behavior can lead to behavior change. When we see a behavior that we need to try to understand, we have to look at some really important key things. The when and where it's most likely or when it's most likely to occur or least likely to occur, what triggers or the common antecedents for the behavior, why it's happening, or the common reasons or functions. And that we can usually get from looking at the common consequences. So what happens right after the behavior? We need to keep these important things in mind when we work to de-escalate behaviors when they do occur. Failure to understand a behavior leaves us constantly reacting. We want to make sure we have some kind of plan so we can respond to behavior and not just react to behavior. Here are the four phases of behavior or the crisis continuum. Some of your children, young adults that you take care of, or young adult children may know the zones of behavior. So I went ahead and I put the graphics in here as well in case they use that terminology or that language with you. So calm, stable functioning is when things are going well. Well for who? Well for your child. They can maybe identify that as being in the green zone or being in the blue zone. Then we move up to pre-crisis. Pre-crisis is when there's some kind of unresolved problem. Sometimes the unresolved problem leaves us frustrated or worried. We might be excited about something, so that might be more of the yellow zone. While as if we have an unresolved problem that makes us sad or maybe in this particular situation that we're in right now, bored, that could be the blue zone, and that's pre-crisis. So once again, calm, stable functioning, everything is going well for your child. Pre-crisis, some type of unresolved problem. Crisis is when we get to the very top of the cycle. At this point, there's anger, there's perhaps yelling, or some things that we might consider to be out of control. In crisis, we can't really de-escalate at this point. So the training is really going to be focusing on calm, stable functioning, hopefully some good things that you're doing for prevention, as well as the de-escalation, which is the 10 things that we're going to be focused on today, which we can use when our student or our child, is in pre-crisis. And then of course, once everything is over, they're in post-crisis. And we need to remember that post-crisis is a delicate time, a time where we need to process, understand, and be ready to help our child get back to calm and stable functioning. So here are some signs of escalating behavior. What we need to remember is just because we see these signs doesn't mean the child is in crisis. It just means that these are times that we can intervene. So let's talk about a few of these. Breaking items or property, whining or crying. They might start testing limits. They might be running out of the area. They might start taking shoes off. Our littles like to do this. They may have increased volume, so they start talking louder and louder. We may see some pencil tapping, picking at nails, skin, or hair. We might see a head down when they should be engaged, or we think they should be engaged in something. Other children may engage in arguing. They may be defiant. We might see some verbal aggression, which we define as using profanity or being extremely aggressive, loud in our approach. Disruption, maybe of the siblings in the home, bothering others. Off-task behavior, so you've told them to get to work on the computer and they're doing everything but. Eyes darting, leaving area, or maybe even falling out of chairs. So there are some things that when we talk about de-escalation or we think about de-escalation, we should really try first. So we first want to achieve eye contact if possible. We want to use your child's name. We want to use proximity and still allow for some personal space. So proximity really just means how far away or how close you are to the child. We want to watch our nonverbal signals or body language. We may have to use visuals. So we want to make sure that our bodies are open, ready to talk, ready to engage. And depending on our own child's level of functioning and level of need for supports, we may be using these visuals. And then, of course, once everything calms down, we want to use that specific praise. I really like the way you used your breathing strategy. I really like the way you listened, things of that nature. Here are the top 10 or the 10 de-escalation strategies that we're going to talk about today. We want to remember communication is key. We're going to stay calm. We're going to assess the situation, set clear boundaries, reflective listening, provide reasonable options and choices, strive to gain success quickly. We're going to assist with coping skills, use alternative strategies, distractions if at all possible. And we got to remember that teamwork makes the dream work. Communication is key. The first thing we want to think about is trying to identify what our child is trying to communicate through the challenging behavior. So here's a quick example. A child pushes her brother who is working at the computer. We have to stop for a second and think, is she trying to access the computer or is she trying to interact socially or get her brother's attention? When we think in this way, what it does is it allows us to think quickly on our feet. And if we already have a plan of action on what our consequences are going to be, that's going to be helpful. But if we don't, we quickly can guide the situation or coach the situation to be successful. We want to prompt for more effective communication. We want to use a matter-of-fact tone of voice in providing the redirection. And we want to make sure to reinforce the first instance of more acceptable communication. So if the little child moves back to the area or moves back to their seat, moves back to their computer, whatever the scenario might be, I'm just using the one that's here. We want to praise them. Oh, great job going back to your seat. I'll be right with you. Great job going back to your computer. I'll be right with you. What we want to think about with communication is we want to keep it short and simple. Less is more. Stay calm. So I know this is difficult. I am a parent too, but we want to think about how can I find my calm in these kinds of situations. So first of all, we can take a deep breath as this will allow time for us to think about what we're going to say. That's really important. We want to also scan our own bodies for tightness and try to loosen it up before we make any kind of approach towards our child. Remember that nothing is perfect and think big picture. Is this going to matter next week, next year, etc.? Especially as we go to redirect or to help the child calm down. We want to quickly assess the situation. The way that we do this is we're going to be as non-confrontational as possible. We're going to watch our body, specifically our hands and our arms. We want to make sure that they're open. We want to focus on making more start requests than stop requests. So it's time to begin blank rather than stop that, stop that, stop that. It kind of engages our children in a different way. We also may have to, even within the home setting, make structural or environmental modifications. So we may have to have the child move to a different part of the house, for example. Maybe the one child comes with you while the other finishes what they're doing. And last but not least on this, in assessing the situation, while we're assessing to see how much we need to do to support the situation, we want to have that non-reactive response and neutral tone of voice as much as possible. So in assessing the situation, there's also some redirections that occur, which is the little graphic that you see at the bottom. We want to make sure that we're always telling them what we want them to do. So instead of stop kicking your brother, feet on the floor as you walk next to your brother, those kinds of things. All right, this one's tough for most of us, but in order to really de-escalate, we have to set clear boundaries. We want to be prepared. We want to think ahead. We want to know what to expect. We want to make sure that our expectations are age grade or developmentally appropriate. That's really important in how we set boundaries. We want to use simple, clear, and consistent language. Our tone of voice should be firm but kind. And we want to be confident in our decision or choice, even if we change our mind. So once we hear out our child and it makes sense to us what they're saying, okay, we want to still come across as confident, although we might have changed our approach or our plan that we had in place. And this is really important when we're dealing with pre-crisis behaviors, is we need to expect that there's going to be feelings. And sometimes there's upset feelings on both sides, not just one side. And we need to expect that and prepare for that as well. When we use the strategy of reflective listening, we want to focus on feelings. We're really listening. We're listening to understand, not just listening to solve a problem. Oftentimes, I think as parents, as educators, we try to listen to solve a problem. When we reflectively listen, we want to listen to understand and then move forward towards helping the person solve their own problem. So we want to focus on feelings. We want to show empathy for our child's situation. So empathy statements could be something like this. We want to make sure that we remember that they're entitled to how they feel. It looks like you're sad today. I'm so sorry you feel that way. Please remember that some of our children, especially those on the autism spectrum, we want to try and avoid open-ended questions, and we want to offer a choice statement instead. It looks like you feel blank or blank. And that could really be helpful in helping them process the language or use the visuals that you have in front of you. When you're reflectively listening, you want to ask clarifying questions, only the ones that are essential. And that's important, and that's not easy to do. And we want to make sure that our body language and tone are as non-judgmental as possible. All right, how do we provide reasonable options and choices? Well, we need to first understand that most people thrive on having some kind of choice. It's really important. So let's just take a second to think about this. Would you go to a restaurant as often if you didn't have a choice of what to eat? Think about the movie, if they only played one movie, or other activities. Do you like to have choices when you're upset? And the reason I'm taking the time to have you kind of think about this is choice is important to us as adults, and we learn to make choice through our childhood, and it's important to do the best that we can to support our own children in making good choices. So when we're de-escalating behavior, we want to provide reasonable options. So what's important to think about is that you can actually insert choice without actually changing what you want the child to do. So you've already stated your expectation. That is what it is. But think about this. Do you want to do this math with marker or crayon? Are they still doing the math? Do you want to type the response, or do you want to write it out? They're still doing the writing assignment. So things like that can be very helpful, especially when you've already set the expectation. You're just wanting to give them a choice as to how they meet that expectation. All right, another tough one. Strive to gain success as quickly as you can. Remember, this is not easy to do, I understand, but we want to reinforce the child's first on-task response. So if we tell them to go put a dish in the sink and they do it, we gotta celebrate that. All right. In situations that are likely to cause escalation, we know our children best. We want to immediately provide a choice or the replacement behavior. In case you're not sure, a replacement behavior is the behavior you want the person or child to do instead of what they are doing right now. So here's an example. I know already that Tommy gets upset when computer time ends, right? Because he goes from computer time to reading time. Therefore, before I tell him it's time's up, I'm going to say something like, Tommy, computer time's almost over. Then when I ring the bell, you can say, aw, man, and aw, man becomes the replacement behavior. And that's really helpful because you kind of practice that and then you celebrate it when Tommy does it. We also want to make sure that we think about there's other ways to gain success quickly. And one way to do that is to provide several instructions that are easy for the student or child to have success with, and then build back into your original instruction. This works well with our children and young adults with autism. So something like touch your nose, touch your head, touch your ears, let's get to work. So then you can, oh, great job doing that. And then we get to work. So it kind of is engaging. There's also movement involved, which is really important to what we do when we de-escalate. The other thing we can do is we can assist with learning coping skills and practicing coping skills, that we may already know. So things like this include relaxation techniques such as deep breathing, counting. We can use a stress ball of some kind. We may want to set up or allow access to the cool down zone or a calm down zone in our own homes. And then we want to provide some sensory options for de-escalation. If you look at the bottom of the screen, there's a lazy 8 breathing example down there. One of the resources that we have provided is some different types of sensory breathing. And all you have to do is open up those resources, print them or download them, use them as you would like. But what makes this sensory breathing is your finger moves as you breathe in and as you breathe out. And it can be very soothing to move your hands and your finger as you breathe. The other thing that we can do is we can use some alternate activities. So movement activities like taking a brain break. Taking a brain break can be playing Simon Says. It can be playing tic-tac-toe. It can be things like that. Provide independent activity. Maybe they get to do a preferred activity after they do a non-preferred activity, or maybe you know that your child's not a big fan of math, but we get math done in the morning and then we get to do some reading. And sometimes we just need something in a quiet space. Maybe we color and things like that. The last thing for using alternate activities is we can redirect using a quick change of scenery. Maybe they go outside, run around for a minute, and then they come back in and get ready to work. We got to remember that teamwork makes the dream work. None of us are in this alone. We are in it together. So we want to identify some resources that you may have to help you when needed. What types of things might you need help with? So I want you to think for a second and reflect on what you might need help with right now, and what resources do you have access to that may be able to help you with these things. You want to always make sure you recognize your personal limits, especially when looking to de-escalate an unresolved problem or a child in pre-crisis. We want to identify our go-to people. So other family members that live in the home, friends that you may want to call and get some information from or have some discussions with. And let's not forget about your child's teacher, okay? So we put some systems in place in order to ask for some help. First, reach out to your child's teacher. Let them know that you're having concerns or having difficulty with de-escalation or crisis behaviors. They will reach out to district staff on the behavior group or behavior team. That's the part of the team that I work with. District staff and or your teacher will connect with you to set up a time to meet on a virtual platform or via phone to be able to problem solve and support you through whatever challenges we can remotely. So bringing it all together, top 10, let's think about it. We're going to respect personal space. We're going to do our best to stay calm. I know that's difficult sometimes. We're going to establish verbal contact. We're going to keep it short and simple. We're going to use those reflective listening skills to identify wants and feelings. We're going to listen closely. We're going to agree, or we're going to agree to disagree. Sometimes our expectation is what our expectation is, but don't forget about offering those reasonable options. We're going to set those clear boundaries, offer choices, and debrief after there's an event. That's really important. So once again, if you need some support, on the last slide, it's all outlined for you. I just want to say thank you so much for meeting with me here today and for spending time with me. I hope this has been helpful to you, and please don't forget to go in and look at those resources, and see you next time. Bye-bye.